Two things before I get started. One is I apologize in advance. I'm probably going to make someone mad in the audience. You'll see in a few minutes why. Second is a shameless plug. This is actually a presentation. It's from an article that's actually that I have in franchising article in this issue maybe. So take a look at that as well. That'll have more information probably than my 10 minutes will. All right. So as you can see, we're talking about why you should own versus rent your franchise sales channels. You're probably thinking, what does that mean exactly? I'll sort of take you through it. Tell me if this looks like franchising to you guys at all. You've got a lot of people, this herd mentality. What I'm talking about that specifically is, just a show of hands, if anybody using brokers and broker networks? Yes. Traditional advertising, either Sirius, Success, Sky, those sort of things. A lot of people use those as well to drive franchise development leads. Certainly social media, online advertising. There's a lot of things there. The second thing is that, I don't know, I suspect that you probably get these a lot too. Has anyone ever gotten a phone call about a feature story that was going to be running in a certain magazine or running in TV? Right? When you find out later it's pay to play, clearly. This is one that was put out recently that one of our clients got from Inc. and getting your company listed on Inc., which is a great idea, and then you end up having to pay for it. So the point of this being is that we're all sort of using a lot of the same tools and pushing out content through a lot of the same channels. And what that leads to is this. Too many dogs, not enough dog food. You've got brokers, you've got the portals, you've got brands in different categories. Everyone's sort of chasing, and many times the same prospect. So what happens with that is the prospect gets overwhelmed. It's probably not the situation you would love to be in, but it is the situation that most of us are in. So this, it gets worse. The rent but never own approach is riskier than ever. I'll sort of tell you what I mean by that. What I mean is you don't own your content or access to your audiences. For example, franchise portals and brokers, I mean, they own the channel clearly. That's certainly, they put the money and they build it, and that's why you're renting it. But what if, I'll just make a crazy thing up. What if someone bought 3 broker networks and rolled them into one, or something like that? In other words, you're vulnerable in that case. Traditional advertising, again, you certainly don't own Sirius or Sky or any of those, so you're basically renting your space there. Online advertising, much the same way. Social media, the same way as well. So I'll give you an example. Facebook, I think we all know that Facebook is charging you more to maybe in some cases reach less people. They're also looking at, this is something that I've heard, is that they're looking at charging you more when leads actually convert from them. So there's all these people that you're getting your leads from right now have they're playing a different game than you are. And how do you sort of use that but build your own sales channel where you control more of the outcome? All right, so what if you created your own franchise development lead channel? Again, what are we talking about here? We're talking about where you own the access to the audience yourself. You can impact the number of addressable names. I mean, everyone in here has a database of names, whether it's consumer, whether it's franchise development. You all have your own database. How can you impact the number of names that are in there? It also allows you to build a brand relationship on your terms. If you think about it versus being in a magazine versus having your own channel, obviously you're the star, your brand's the star, you're able to communicate what the message is. No more sharing access with other companies as you do with the other channels. You control the message. I mean, critically important to where you control the message of what that prospect is seeing at any given time. You control the timing. So you don't have to wait for the next issue. You don't have to wait for your rotation to sell on Sirius or whatever timelines you have to fit. You don't have to fit those anymore. You can make your own. And then you can create monetary value from your contacts. Now, this is something that when I mentioned earlier in my key takeaways about this $250,000 you have sitting within your own realm that you're not really maximizing. I'll get into that a little bit more as well. All right, so you've got your database, but it's the real value is the audience, not just the leads you're working. I mean, the typical ways where people think about their franchise development database, for example, are, how do I convert these folks to franchisees? That's the number one thing that we all are thinking about. Secondarily, how do I nurture these warm leads? Those are pretty typical things that you would expect. Here's a couple things that maybe to think about that are a little bit different than that. You can get referrals from the cold leads. You've got a lot of people in your database. How are you able to sort of use that database to get leads from people that may not be a prospect for your franchise, but some of their friends or someone they know maybe? Product service takeaways or surveys, that's very important. So if you have 10,000 people in a database, you can find out what do they think about products or surveys or services before you ever launch them. As many of you probably know, you can find like prospects on social channels. So to be able to mine that database you have and find people that you might not have thought about before are something you need to think about. You can also test sales messaging. If you're getting ready to come out with a new campaign or you want to find out what message resonates with people that are in your sort of target profile, use your database to do that. Monetize it. Maybe you start renting your own channel to brands that are complementary to your brand, to where you can use that revenue to power your marketing even more. Then you can even launch new brands or create new revenue streams like Red Bull. I don't know if anybody or many people know what Red Bull has done, but I'm going to show you in a second. It's really fascinating what they've done. So here's how you do it in a very truncated way. You continue to use the channels you're using. You continue to use social media, you continue to use PR, Sirius FM, whatever you're using to drive lead flow, continue to do that. But the difference being, get them off those channels as soon as possible onto your own channel. Don't have them on other channels, bring them to your channel as soon as you possibly can. Obviously, use it with data analytics and HubSpot to make it and turn it into a real actionable lead. And then start looking at your database. The database, here's how I figured out the $250,000. I based it on, you have 5,000 names in your database, and you probably have $50 in marketing driving those leads to you. I think those numbers are a little bit low personally. How many folks have 5,000 names in their database? Show of hands. How many have more than 5,000? Okay, so you do the math and figure out 50. I think it's a low number, but you figure how much money you've got in your database and how do you really leverage that database to drive your business forward. So the first thing you need to do is you need to get more addressable contacts. You need to feed new data and contacts constantly to build your database. How do you figure out how to monetize it? How do you test brand messaging and intelligence and research? All those things I mentioned earlier. And then you start doing things of your own. Obviously, you're doing a lot of these things now, except you're not really leveraging the data as I'd mentioned. Email, direct mail, self-paced webinars, live webinars, ebooks, virtual events. All those things that you've used, but how do you use those in a new compelling way? Branded magazines, I'll jump off that to go into what I'm talking about with Red Bull. Everybody knows Red Bull. Everybody's probably had that can before and probably have drank it. I certainly have. I certainly try to stay away from it if I can, but certainly I've drank it many times. What you may not know is they have a thing called the Red Bulletin. Anybody heard of the Red Bulletin before? Yeah. So what you don't know is that they have a bigger circulation worldwide than Rolling Stone and a lot of other huge magazines that you may think about. And why did they do that? They wanted to reach and they wanted to take their own database and they wanted to build their own channel to their customer without going through traditional channels. They also have something called Red Bull content. Now think about this in the context of just a senior care, like with yours, for example. Just say that you have a magazine that's called Celebrate Aging. I'm just making this up for the point of conversation. And then you start looking at developing content for other people. Then you start developing your own content pool. And they have Red Bull Publishing, music publishing. They have Red Bull Records. They even had Red Bull TV. So you see how you sort of take creating your own channel and then use it to launch new products, new services. So I challenge you to sort of think about your business that way, which is a very different way of thinking about it than traditional way. But if you really use that database and you really build all the equity you've built, you're going to be able to build something very powerful for yourself. But Rome wasn't built in a day, certainly. But I will say the key to getting started, getting ahead is getting started. So I encourage you to start thinking like this about your brand and about how do you leverage the data that you have and how do you start owning your own sales channel. Thank you.